Cosmere can be a confusing place.
From allomancy to surge binding, there's a lot to look out for.
We're your hosts and escorts to the realms. I'm Griff.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the Silverlight Guide to the Cosmere. So,
We're back
we are back.
with a review of The Lost Metal.
And I suppose... Wait, did we already do a recap of the con?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is just The Lost Metal.
Yep. This should just be The Lost Metal.
Yeah. The fourth in the Era 2 trilogy.
Yeah. With his explanation that kind of the second and third are paired off, and the first and the
Right.
fourth are paired off.
And there is a lot that we see in the fourth being paired off with the first and going back to things that were set up in that.
Yeah.
Um,
What, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being just you had to put it down after two
right.
pages. It was absolutely horrible. You would not ever recommend buying this book.
Right.
To a 10,
Being,
which is this is the most immaculate book you've ever read. Every word is perfectly placed.
I would put it at a 7.5 to an 8.
Okay.
There were some story choices that were a little
Mm-hmm.
though not terrible by any means. I did, however, like some of the, I won't call it fan service per se, but the fact that we got gloves off with the crossover.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's fan service.
No.
But it is really the first foray into having a bunch of Cosmere stuff all at
Together.
once.
Yes.
I would give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
If I'm being conservative. There were parts of it that I really liked.
Right.
I don't remember what those are. Just kidding. It has been a month and a few days since we listened to it.
I think there were a few things that I felt were hinted at that were not dealt with, and I was a little disappointed about that.
Oh, really?
I would have liked to see Ep Metal finally burned.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Yeah, and I'm so, like I know that like there's the whole thing of it combusting in contact with water and all of that. I get that, but I still feel like some form or fashion Sanderson could have come up with a workaround. Like honestly, to me, gold burning spike, gold ferrochemical spike, give yourself that infinite healing, and then burn at metal.
Good. I will say the way that he did use Ep Metal was a really solid plot.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely am not disappointed with the way it was used in the book. I would have just liked to see it burned. And maybe he's saving that for a future for Era 3, because Harmony hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
So
let's do a sort of spoiler-ish free section.
Okay. Yeah.
And then follow it up with very specifics.
Yeah.
So we already gave our ratings.
Right.
The
ending surprised me.
That's not spoiler-free.
I know. I'm not talking about
Okay.
specifics. I'm just going to say, in general, the ending surprised me.
Huh. We'll have to talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll talk that
later.
in the spoiler-free section. There were... Anyway, I won't go into the specifics.
I really liked the first half of the book a lot.
Fair.
I thought the pacing was good.
Yes.
The plot points were good. The introduction of new characters and important Cosmere connections was really well done. With it had that drive of, oh, I think I know who this person is.
Right.
And then quite a bit later, confirmed.
I will also say that I liked Maricy's involvement a lot.
Yeah.
I liked her chapters. I liked her part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was... I liked seeing her become a main character in her own right. Like,
yeah,
because she's always been paired with somebody else in the previous books or
right.
part of the group, and I liked seeing her kind of doing her own thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really liked Wayne's character
Yes.
growth. This is maybe a tiny bit of a tangent. This is the first time Sanderson has used what I'm going to say is crude humor.
Right.
Like explicitly crude humor.
Right.
And I was not necessarily a fan of that.
That's fair.
I thought I think I counted like 4-ish times where he referenced calling somebody a dick, or
Right.
saying they were a bag of dicks,
Right.
or talking about intercourse or something like that, and I thought it cheapened it a bit. Like they
Well, okay, to be fair, and throwing out my own point of view
Yeah.
here, I will say that while I am not usually a fan of the, oh, well, it's what my character would do, I would say in the course of Wayne and the fact that Wayne kind of grew up in the roughs.
and it was all of those did deal with Wayne said.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like it is actually a legitimate good point of it is what Wayne would do. Growing up in the roughs, growing up in effectively the what's the term I'm looking for? It's like analogy, but that's not the word I'm looking for. The stand-in for the Wild West.
Sure.
In the
Yeah.
Cosmere. Or in Scadrial. Analog, thank you. That is the word I was looking for, yes.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a valid.
Then I think that it does kind of explain where that comes from. I'm not saying you have to like it anymore. I'm just saying that I think it was a valid portrayal of Wayne's character.
Yeah, it would have maybe felt. I didn't feel that way in the first 3 of the lot.
Well, and I think he did hold himself back, and I will say that might be the one part where I agree with you, which is if that was going to be part of Wayne's character, it should have been there from the beginning.
I would have, in a heartbeat, I would have substituted out most of that crude humor with the funny word mishaps that were so prevalent in 1 through 3. So
yeah,
that's kind of like an underlying gripe that I have.
Yeah,
is like,
that's fair.
Now I don't feel as comfortable wholesale recommending this to everybody, because it really wasn't that egregious. And honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard us say things worse.
Yeah. No, that's true.
But when I talk about it to my parents or older people, like, okay, well, I'm sure they've seen movies that
have had worse, and that's the thing where I think Sanderson, as he moves forward, especially with the mixing of the Cosmere, I think we might actually get that a little bit more, because I feel like, also the fact of as Scadrial moves forward in time, we're going to see that kind of humor become less taboo.
Sure, that makes sense.
Now, whether or not he'll include it in Era 3, I mean, I think that'll highly depend on the characters and things like that.
Yeah. I thought his inclusion of funny sexual references in the Stormlight Archive were more tasteful, and it really does come down to the character. But yeah, that's really all I have to say for that. It's like some of those jokes really didn't land for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And while you make a really good argument that they were to the character's strengths or
true to the character,
yeah. There's
and that's the thing. The fact is, you can have a character that's a perfectly valid character and true to themselves, and still not be a character that is liked by somebody who read the book. So
Moash.
Well, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, you with the fucking con.
That was hilarious to me. That will always be hilarious.
We're gonna get you a shirt for next time.
Yeah, Moash did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And then let's see. What else can we say about the book that's spoiler free?
I will say, and this is kind of spoiler free, for the most part. I was a little surprised that nothing new was done with the magic system.
With Allomancy and Furukumi specifically?
Yeah, with Allomancy and Furukumi specifically.
You're right.
Like, I was kind of surprised that this was the ultimate book of this era specifically, and nothing was done with that.
No. What we did see, though, I think we could probably move into spoiler.
Yeah, let's consider this now. I think we've talked about what we could spoiler free.
Yeah, if and
the fact is, I mean, this podcast is kind of inherently spoilered
everything except the secret project's coming out. Well, I'm hoping to put this out next week. So
coming out
soon,
very soon, in just a few days. Yeah. When this podcast drops, and we will be going in blind.
That's right. So
we will, and we'll review them, I guess, when we're done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So spoilers for The Lost Metal, and of course all of the Cosmere.
Right.
Going off of what you just said, nothing new with Furukumi or Allomancy, or I guess we should have said Hemalurgy.
Right.
We did see, though, that I got the sense at the end of Era 1 that Hemalurgy required the specificity that only a god could use to pinpoint the spikes.
Right.
But at the end of The Lost Metal, Sanderson specifically set it up so that Wax has spent so much time looking at the Hemalurgy charts that he can insert the spike
where it needs to be. Yeah, and I will agree that I think that was interesting. And there are some questions I have when we start talking about the end that I'll be interested to delve into a little bit. But yeah, I will say that was that. I mean, I think one of the things that end of Era 1 set up is that trying to elicit a specific result with Hemalurgy that is not just the transference of powers does require that specificity.
Right.
The creation of the Kolos, the creation of the the Steel Inquisition.
Inquisitors,
the Steel Inquisitors. That definitely requires, well, either somebody who has absolutely zero morals about fucking around with people, or the specificity of a god.
Yeah. So that was, I think, a useful thing to change. Just that sense of, oh, well, actually, let's say you were a light weaver and you took and you had a drawing of the hemalurgic spots.
Right.
And then you used your light weaving to pinpoint those spots on the human body. Well, now you don't even need to have studied it. You just...
Now, and one of the things that he has said, I think, either explicitly or implicitly, one of the two, is that hemalurgy is going to be something that is going to affect the Cosmere as a whole.
Yeah.
Now, I will say on that front, and this is a bit of a tangent, but still, the mixing of magic systems is something that's making the Cosmere a little bit messy.
I agree with that.
And I'm not wholly a fan of it. I'm not wholly against it, but it's making it messy in my mind, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that.
So specifically, are we talking about at around the half point in this book, we get introduced to characters with abilities we have and haven't seen before?
That's not actually what I'm talking about.
Okay.
What I'm talking about more is the fact of somebody like Hoyd.
Yeah.
Where we see Hoyd with not just light weaving, because of the fact that he bonded with
design,
but also
I've bonded a literal monster. Yeah.
Also Allomancy and Furukumi, because we know that
he did the
Lerasium. The ferrochemical destiny is probably how he's appearing where he needs to be, even though he's not exactly sure where he's supposed to be. And the fact is that on a lesser extent, with crossovers in the Cosmere becoming more common, but also not locking magic systems into denizens of that planet. Mm-hmm. I feel like we could very much reach a point where people with a multitude of abilities become almost commonplace, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that.
I think there's a natural check on it, and that is the need for very specific. There's very specific ways to get those abilities,
right? And I'm not going to say we're necessarily going to see somebody like Hoyd with all of the, because like, yeah, there is no Lerasium left, barring.
There is. Griff is lying to you.
And barring a very specific exception.
And Harmony is lying to Kelsier. Sorry, Discord is lying to Kelsier.
But with Hemalurgy coming into the mix, and with us having the Ghost Bloods, who are World Walkers.
Yeah, World Hoppers.
World Hoppers. There is no question about that. The fact is that now Feruchemy and or Allomancy is available to pretty much anyone that's willing to stab themselves with a spike.
Right.
And I understand that you need, there's the whole thing about needing, identity free, et cetera, et cetera. I get that. But that even being said, I'm not exactly a huge fan of the idea of a Rosharan Knight just sticking himself with a spike and then being able to push metal.
Your concerns are valid.
Right.
And it definitely has the potential to get messy.
And I understand that Sanderson narratively will probably not do that.
Very often,
if at all. Often. But the fact that it is a potential still causes that messiness in my mind, which is, yes, Sanderson may not, but it could still be done.
Yeah.
And not break canon. Like that's one of the bigger things, is that you can do anything with fanfiction you want.
True.
But a lot of it would break canon. Like, I mean, there's been Doctor Who, Harry Potter crossovers, and I'm like, I'm sorry, that breaks canon 6 ways from Sunday for both series.
Okay. That's fine.
Like, yeah. I mean, as an example, but okay, let's even take the Super Hulock. Like, that was huge. And God, am I showing my age and my Tumblr-ness? Okay, so there was a huge thing. There was a huge conglomerate fandom a few years ago.
Sherlock, Doctor Who, and Superman?
No.
Oh, Supernatural.
Yes, there you go. And they would have crossover gift sets and things like that, where it implied that the characters were interacting and things like that.
GIF sets.
Yes.
GIFs.
GIF, GIF, sets.
I was like, somebody is making merch for this?
No. GIF.
And it's
sets.
Popular?
Yeah, no. But like, sets of GIFs.
Yeah.
Set up in orders that kind of implies that the characters are interacting, even though it doesn't. And the fact is, while I'm not going to yuck on anyone's yum, if that's your thing, then whatever. But that always was messy to me, because the Supernatural, the Doctor Who, and the Sherlock canons don't match up. They just don't. Like, especially Supernatural and Doctor Who. Like, I get that there's infinite planets with infinite creatures, et cetera, in Doctor Who, but that's very explicitly different than having canonical angels and demons.
Yep. Yeah, that I guess so.
And so, anyway, to go back to my original point, in fan fiction, you can do whatever you want, and you can mix fandoms that don't necessarily have matching canons.
Yeah.
But with this, you could have a Roshara Knight that is also a Twinborn by way of hemalurgic spikes and not break canon.
So you're saying Sanderson should not write his own fan fiction of his?
I am I am saying that there is now no longer, especially because hemalurgic spikes are not specifically restricted to just feruchemy or allomancy. We know the Nigrosyl spike can carry investiture as a whole, like blanket. So therefore, you can now transfer any investiture ability to someone else via hemalurgic spike, so long as you set up the scenario correctly. And so now there is literally no divide between who has what powers.
With some checks, like Spren can't leave the Rosharan system.
Right. But even that, they're still working on.
Right. That's true.
And I'm sure that Hoyd is not going to... I'm sure that... Considering that Hoyd appears in...
Lost Metal?
No. Yes. Well, the Era 2. Era 2 specifically. Or in general. The fact that we have seen use of... What are they called? The Aeons?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Aeons, which are Spren-esque.
Yeah.
And clearly they've moved off-world because we get the Aeons in use on Roshar.
Right.
Not to mention Scadrial, for that matter. And considering that we do see Hoyd in... And we see Hoyd with glowing eyes in... Which still bothers me, because I'm still confused as to where that... Because that was in Era 1, and I'm still not sure what the fuck that was about. Why did Hoyd have glowing eyes in Era 1?
In the Secret History.
Yes. And apparently healed. Like, all of it points to Stormlight being in use. Like, clearly it's something else. Clearly it's something else.
Yeah.
But
okay,
the fact that it's so close, and the fact that we've now seen, bottled not Aeon.
The Aeon door.
Yeah, the Aeon door. Yeah, the door being bottled.
Yeah.
Like, Sanderson is very explicitly opening up the Cosmere to everyone.
Yes.
Which I get is a move towards the conclusion of what he's doing with the Cosmere.
Right. And
I'm sure it all has important...
So we hope.
Yeah, applications and things like that. But I will say that it... And it matches Earth in very much this way, which is the fact of, yeah, Earth is messy.
Yeah.
Like, our cultures collide and mix and mash, and trying to say, oh, this is traditionally Japanese. Okay, well, which Japanese tradition? How far back are you going? Like,
yeah, sure.
So I get that, but at the same time, it still does make it very messy in my head, which is, you can have a Rosharan knight that draws on the door and has hemalurgic spikes and Breck's shop with every other character because of how much investiture they've decided to apply to themselves or whatever. Like, as I said, I'm not saying Sanderson himself will do that.
Right.
But it is canonically possible. And I don't know. I'm not a huge fan, I guess.
Yeah. That's a valid concern, and I think a valid line of reasoning. Interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah. And I'll say that I like, theoretically, the mixing of investitures.
Sure.
But theoretically.
Right.
Like, I like the theoretical thought process of following it, but seeing it actually applied to a character, I'm not sure why there's a line in my head for that, but there is.
Huh. Interesting. Bringing it back to the Lost Metal, but still no, you're good. Still kind of keeping it connected. Did you notice the one line? So Sanderson has said that since it comes after Stormlight 5,
right?
He wouldn't. He obviously needs to keep spoilers out of the Lost Metal,
right?
But there was one line that mentioned Roshar,
right? Yes,
and it was Codenames, I think, saying, Roshar is too hostile right now,
yes,
or too inhospitable in some degree. So I'm curious what that means. Obviously, that could mean literally anything.
Yes. Now, I will say we were both wrong
about
on the red-eyed creature.
Okay.
It was not a Khandra.
It wasn't?
No?
You sure?
Pretty sure.
What was it?
I thought it was one of those
soldier dudes?
Yeah. Because, like, we don't see any other Khandra under...
Yeah, you're right.
Autonomy's control.
Huh. Guess I didn't even think about that.
I felt like we were both wrong, because it clearly wasn't the singers, because it was Autonomy.
Right.
But
which was the main spoiler that actually Sanderson got to really quick.
Yeah.
Thank God.
It was Autonomy.
It was Autonomy.
I will say, I get that there's an explanation about it on why it's Autonomy and why Autonomy is acting the way Autonomy does. I still feel thematically it bothers me that it was Autonomy.
And I don't.
Which is fine. I just feel like... Anyway, regardless.
So, I mean, it really, to me, it's exciting because Autonomy is a threat to everywhere.
Okay, here's my issue with Autonomy being presented the way they were.
Okay.
Is that Autonomy was being... what's the word? Made the same as.
Homologous?
Sort of. That'll work. Being made that's not how that word is pronounced.
Homologous?
Is that how it's pronounced?
I think you can do homologous or homologous.
Okay. Regardless, anyway, with individuality. And I don't actually agree with Sanderson's representation of it like that.
You're saying Autonomy... Sanderson was equating Autonomy to individuality?
Yes. Even though it was this mass-produced individuality, I still don't like the idea that Autonomy and the presentation of Autonomy is being equated with individuality.
I'll say, in my head, those two words are very, very close to each other in the fourth dimensional realm where words exist.
Right, but there is a fine line between them. Because autonomy effectively means having control over your own actions.
Right.
But that does not mean that your actions cannot equate to somebody else's actions as well. It just means that you are under control of your own. No one can choose that for you. It is agency.
Right.
Autonomy is agency. Agency, however, is not individuality. Agency is just the control. But if you choose to follow other people, you are still being autonomous. You still have agency, even if you choose to follow, say, a crowd or a trend. Where individuality is, I am my own person. I am going to express myself in an individual fashion. I am going to set myself apart from other people. And while you do have to have autonomy to be individualistic, being autonomous does not automatically make you individualistic.
I don't have anything to argue against that reasoning. I would like to supply, in the terms of the Cosmere, I'd like to supply some things that may help soothe that concern or that way you feel.
Right.
The first is that I believe they mentioned that autonomy was acting weirdly.
Right.
So there's that.
Right.
Which is a blanket statement, which is kind of like, oh, whatever you think this is. Sanderson is also a fan of I'll say the unreliable narrator, right, where a character believes something that is false but tells it like it's true.
Right. Well, and I will also say the pitted and rusted representation of Autonomy's metal.
Yeah.
Definitely speaks to something corrupting Autonomy.
For sure.
That is messing with the way Autonomy, which, to bring it around to an interesting crossover, it is almost very much like the Dresden Files with Nemesis.
Yeah.
Where Nemesis fucks with the natural function of supernatural creatures. Right. It allows Fae to lie and so on and so forth. And I see it being very much like that. And I get that.
Sure. I'd like to, with the unreliable narrator, Odium calls himself Passion, the god of passion. And he's really the god of self-hate. Yes. That's what Odium means. Right. So,
yes.
In a similar vein, but a third thing is that given that there are 16 of the shards,
right,
I feel like a lot can go under each umbrella.
Let me just say this. If Autonomy had been named Individualism, I feel like it would have matched much better with the theme of the book, and I think I would have guessed Individualism as a potential enemy if that had been the name the shard was presented under.
Autonomy sounds cooler, though.
I agree. But it is also misleading, in my opinion.
In your opinion,
yeah. In my opinion, I feel it is misleading. Like if it had been if Sanderson had introduced a shard and said this shard is called individualism, or individuality, or whatever, and we had seen the acts up to now with Scadrial.
Right.
I probably would not have been so vehemently against the idea that was the shard that was attacking Scadrial. Because the fact that Autonomy, especially, and it really bugs that line at the very end of Bands of Mourning, was one of the things that really bugged me. Because whatever creature that was, I think it was one of the warriors, in my opinion.
Sure.
Said, we can't control Scadrial anymore, so we have to destroy it.
Yeah.
And that would match individualism a lot more, in my opinion, than it does Autonomy. And I agree, Autonomy is corrupted in some form or fashion, which I'm curious to see what's causing that, because I'm interested if there is an outside force that is instigating... Like even with Odium, I wonder if there is an outside force of some sort, outside the Cosmere, that is orchestrating things within the Cosmere to bring about a different...
Possibly. I bet right now, I'd bet that any malfeasance, any malaction, any whatever, that we see from the shards comes from the mixture of the shard and the vessel.
Right, but clearly something more is going on with Autonomy, because again, the pitted, rusted look of the metal... I mean, maybe that's the way Autonomy's metal is supposed to look, but I bet money it's not.
It could be that the slice of power, the sliver of power that was then sent as Trell, was that part of Autonomy that could be construed as individualism, sort of. You see what I'm saying?
Maybe, yeah.
If we really want to get that fine cut.
Well, and I suppose I will say that Trell is, in particular, a part of Autonomy that does have autonomy.
Right.
And therefore is able to act on its own.
Yeah.
Which means that it doesn't necessarily have to be as in line with Autonomy as Autonomy themselves are.
True.
So...
True. But that whole... It is a interesting plot point that Autonomy can be viewed as an antagonist to the Cosmere.
Yes.
Based on their goals.
Right.
That is interesting because it leads to all these questions.
Right. And I will not deny that having autonomy as an antagonist is a bad choice.
Right.
That's not what I'm arguing with at all. I was saying that the clues laid out up until this point, in my opinion, did not point to autonomy as I understand the definition of the term.
I think having a White Sands... okay, just making sure. Having a White Sands novel or having that omnibus, I guess we could have read it some other... You have read it.
Yeah, I have read the series that we have thus far.
Yeah, having...
Or listen, anyway.
Or maybe having something like a short story... Two parts to this. If we had something that showed autonomy more as an antagonist somewhere else, it may have...
I feel like had we had a novel that had already portrayed autonomy as an antagonist, because if you look at White Sands and the way the world works and the themes of the story in and of itself, in fact,
which I can't because I haven't.
Right, I know you have not, but I will tell you right now that with the way the story is set up, it is actually very much in line with the idea of autonomy.
Okay.
Of taking control of your actions, of people, of this interplay of restriction and autonomy and choice, and what happens when some people are free to make their choices, or how they get around the restrictions applied to them by the society that White Sands takes place in.
Sure.
And clearly Scadrial, I don't think, has to play into that thematic narrative, because Scadrial is not an autonomy ruled place. It is preservation and ruin. So I am not saying that, but I am saying that I feel like White Sands does embody autonomy in its narrative choices much better than the clues laid out in Scadrial I felt pointed to autonomy.
Is there, if we look at the Sixth of Dusk,
right,
and we assume that Pachi is another avatar of autonomy, which is the general belief.
Right.
That is widely believed because it is by itself. And
right, and there is a single there is a single perpendicularity on Sixth of Dusk.
Right.
Right. Yes.
And it may be one of the planets that has the whole pantheon that is just autonomy.
Right.
If we take into account the Sixth of Dusk, even though it's set thousands of years after Mistborn Era 2,
right,
we take that into account, and the idea of it seems like everything on the island that the Sixth of Dusk is on is just driving you to be the most
it's survival of the fittest taken to the extreme.
Right.
Yes.
Can we apply that and then view Mistborn Era 2 as... Does that help smooth that connection?
Not necessarily. And here's the reason why.
Okay.
Well, okay, there's a couple of things on that front. Firstly, I will say that the Sixth of Dusk thing brings up an interesting question, which is, while there is a single perpendicularity, I am curious whether or not autonomy intentionally set up the bird investiture system situation, or whether that was a natural occurrence.
I want to say it's a natural occurrence.
I want to say it's a natural occurrence as well.
Creatures have conceded to Shadesmore or whatever it is.
Yeah. But I will say that... Well, okay, so there's a couple of... there's a couple of issues there, which is the island being set up to be, or the fact that Sixth of Dusk, at least the slice of it that we see, being that survival of the fittest taken to the extreme, doesn't necessarily derive from autonomy. Because if we're going to say the investiture was naturally forming,
right,
and therefore the bird blocking thought
anything
sense.
With the AVRs.
Yeah. Anything with the AVRs. The world might have been designed that way before autonomy came around.
Designed or just
evolved that way. All I'm saying is that the way that world works could have very easily come around without autonomy's influence whatsoever.
Sure.
And so therefore Pachi being there is just potentially coincidental, and potentially maybe Pachi was already an antagonist that heroes of that world defeated.
True.
Which is why we don't necessarily see Pachi. I mean, clearly Sixth of Dusk is a short story that is dealing with a very specific storyline. But the fact that it does take place thousands of years, potentially, after even Era 2.
Yeah.
There's a very good chance that it takes place at least hundreds, if not thousands of years after Era 3.
Still would be thousands.
Yeah. Then I'd hazard to guess to say that Pachi probably isn't even there anymore.
Yeah, I mean...
And just the worship of Pachi, became part of the natural mythology of the planet.
We could just draw endless hypotheticals.
Right.
It could be that Pachi came to the planet, and because there was a shard, or a sliver of a shard, allowed investiture to evolve that way.
Right, which is an option. All I'm saying is that, let me put it this way. I will say that Sixth of Dusk, we do not have enough context for me to feel like that eases the issues that I have with autonomy versus individuality.
Sure.
Now, I'm not going to argue with Sanderson. He's writing a good story. Autonomy has been presented in a certain way, and I am okay with that being the way that he decides to present autonomy.
Yeah.
However, I will say, without that context, I feel like I was not necessarily off base to feel like the shard attacking Scadrial was a different shard than autonomy.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And then, so maybe let's wrap it back to other parts of the story.
Right. I did like the inclusion of the Ghost Bloods.
Yep. That was a solid decision.
Yes.
I would have liked to see what the Gold and Red Warriors could do.
I would have liked to see that as well, yeah. The fact that was kind of kabootsed from the beginning.
Yeah.
Was kaboots? Is the word right? Kaboshed? Anyway, regardless, the fact that it was negated before it even came to be.
Yeah, which was obviously, J.J. Abrams' poetry, it rhymes. Or it's like poetry, it rhymes with The Force Awakens and A New Hope. Obviously, that was Sanderson's... I don't know if it was Sanderson's intention, but that's ultimately what he chose to do.
Right.
Was have it be like the climax of the third Era 1 book.
Right.
It felt... I keep using the word cheap.
Let me say this. I would have liked to see a few of the warriors come over.
Right.
And then they close the portal.
Right.
And they still have to deal with a limited amount of golden warriors.
Right.
And have that be kind of the climactic.
Right.
Or have to fight through a few of them to get to the point where they could close the portal.
Yeah. That would have been...
Either way, I would have been okay with that, because I would have, like you said, I would have liked to see what they could do. I would have also liked... And I think maybe that's something that was kind of missing in this book a little bit, which was something we see in Era 1 a lot, because of the story that it is, and less so in Era 2, again, because of the kind of story it is, but I also think that it started off a little bit higher in the beginning of Era 2 and grew substantially less, was the battle application of allomantic and ferrochemical arts.
Okay.
Because obviously in Era 1 we see it a lot. Mostly because we're dealing with full-blown Mistborns, for one. But also because I think of the story that it tells, which is, sort of a medieval era fantasy novel. We do see a lot of battle application of allomancy and, well, mostly just allomancy, to be honest. We see a little bit of feruchemy with Seiza and things like that, but for the most part, it's just allomancy. And then we get to Era 2, and I get that the point of Era 2 was like we're moving away from the Wild West era into a more...
the Industrial Revolution.
Right, more Industrial Revolution. So I understand that the waning of battle applications was intentional. But I feel like it would have been a nice throwback to the first book to have some of these Golden Warriors come through and see these allomancers applying their gifts combat-wise.
And if we take it from that perspective, but then we look at the characters that were actually there draining the resources, they weren't warriors of any kind.
No.
They were people that didn't train combat-wise.
Right.
And maybe Sanderson did start writing it out and thought that these people would get slaughtered by the Golden Warriors, and then Marasi would be left alone and had to...
And see, that's where I kind of disagree, because I feel like it could have been a nice sort of throwback to this idea of, yes, they aren't combat trained. I agree. But I think that there is something to be said for the kind of scrappy idea of a bunch of people ill-suited to a task rising to the occasion and pulling it off anyway. And I think if we had just had 2 maybe Golden Warriors come through, I feel like we could have seen that kind of story, which is, yes, they're not combat trained in their arts, but through potentially other applications, kind of home aloneing it in a way, but also with allomancy.
I really want to say most of them weren't. I mean, most of them were the emotional.
And there is no reason that couldn't have affected the Golden Warriors.
Well, sure. But then you'd have that plus somebody wielding a broken pipe on the ground to try to beat the warrior. Like,
sure, actually, just have one come through.
Yeah.
And have that be, like, the big climactic battle of that group, which is, you have all of these very poorly trained allomancers against one very impressive soldier, I'm assuming, of some sort.
But what if it was wearing Titanic bronze and couldn't be pierced by anything except the Spear of Destiny? Like, I'm just kidding. Gold warriors with red eyes.
No, I get it.
Anyway, this book could have gone any which way.
Yeah, it could have, and I'm not saying again that this is even like we're griping a lot on little things, but I will also say that, like, before Sanderson got rid of blatant use of allomantic arts for combat, I would have liked to see more of a throwback to it in this book.
We did get really lengthy battles with Wax and Wayne.
Yeah, we did, which is fair.
I thought the third time I thought those two should have been beaten the second time they showed up. So I gave it a 6 out of 10.
Right.
And I want to explain kind of bigger picture why. Again, the first half of the book felt real solid.
Right.
And then the last half of the book felt like shifting sand under my feet.
Yeah, I get that.
Where it went from idea to idea to idea to idea.
I will say that I one of the things that I had that was, I will agree with you, that was a little bit of an issue on the second book, was that Wax kept coming to the wrong conclusion based on the evidence. And that was a little aggravating. like, especially with the investigation of Wax into what the set was planning and how they planned to pull it off.
Right.
I would have liked to see, with the intelligent conclusions that Wax has come to so far, even ones you might say hedge on the leap of logic side of things. Hedge, as I said, not necessarily blatantly there, but kind of skirt along it. The fact that he just kept coming to the most basic conclusion with the evidence provided was a little annoying.
And we know that Sanderson but comes up with the ending and then writes backwards. Not writes backwards, but he writes the outline backwards.
Might have a jelly bean?
Oh, sure.
Or whatever those are.
Yeah, they're a jelly bean.
Okay.
And maybe it felt a little more obvious in this book to me that it was like when something popped up, it wasn't. Sometimes in other books of Sanderson, and definitely by other authors, they just tell you something that isn't necessary to the plot.
Right.
And it felt in this that almost everything was necessary to the plot, especially in the second half. And so it was like, I don't know how to explain it. Was it that I could see things coming, or there was too much to hang on to?
Here's what it was, actually. Is that I think things were a little bit too coincidental.
Yeah.
Like the fact of Autonomy opening the portal in the Allomantic village.
Yeah.
That they had set up, and having the Allomancer specifically there to drain the resources and prevent the portal from opening. And like there is always going to be narrative coincidence when you are telling a story.
That's right.
There's just no way around it. There always is. The hero will get there in time. They will discover what they need to discover to prevent the bad guy from, achieving the ultimate ends of their plot, so on and so forth. That's fine. I will say the fact that we were like, oh, we discovered what happened with all those kidnapped Allomancers from the first book that was never addressed and never brought up in Shadows of Self or Bands of Mourning.
Right.
And just as we do that, it is the time that Autonomy is appearing and summoning the Golden Warriors. Like, I would have liked to see the Allomancers discovered. I would have liked to see the Allomancers discovered last book, actually.
Okay.
And have Marasi keeping in contact with them through like kind of a support network thing. And then one of them mentioning, oh yeah, there was this weird thing by the mayor's house. Because the pool was by the mayor's house, right? Yeah. I was wanting to make sure I was remembering that correctly. Or having something about that come up, and Marasi make the connection of, oh shit, like maybe it's abandoned now, but this is where Autonomy is choosing to stage their invasion.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have felt a little less contrived.
That's fair. Yeah. It did feel a little contrived. But what did we like about the book?
So, I liked Wayne's development.
Wayne's character.
I will say I did not expect the ending, but that does not mean I didn't like it.
Didn't expect the ending.
with the
him needing to burn his bend alloy to
him not only being the one chosen to save everyone.
Yeah.
Secondly, the way he did it insofar as not only burning his bend alloy, but burning it with the aluminum alloy. Duralumin. And basically creating almost more of a moving so fast that he was almost outside of time. Like time was frozen to him.
Wayne was aside from those crude jokes that I didn't really like.
Right.
Wayne's character and the plot revolving around Wayne with his background.
Right.
With the money and the investments. Brilliant.
Yes.
Loved it.
Yes.
That was great. I do believe we haven't put this episode out yet. Because anyways, and then when we talked about our predictions, I think one of the first things I said was that Wayne was going to die. And then I changed it to Steris or something. But definitely after reading the prologue for the book.
It was... Well, I felt like Wayne would potentially die. I think I didn't expect him to die in the way that he did, doing what he did. Because, and that, to be fair, I think it was because I didn't expect the creation of a Cosmere equivalent of a nuclear bomb.
Oh, sure. That's true.
Because that is, like, I get that Scadrial is moving into the Industrial Revolution, but we are nowhere near the time period in American history where the nuclear bomb will be created. So the fact that a Cosmere equivalent, or a Scadrial equivalent at the very least, was the big plot, centric threat, was interesting.
Yeah. I agree. Other things I liked was the Moonlight character.
Yes.
That was really cool. I know fans had been longing for Shai to come from the Emperor's Soul.
Yes.
Into the Cosmere.
And I liked the inclusion of showing us how an Aeon Door user could appear in another place.
That was awesome.
Yes.
That I didn't necessarily love what happened right after it with her just, she's using this power to disappear. That's not very useful.
Yeah, I will agree. But the explanation of it by itself
was really, really cool.
Yes.
It was really cool.
That was really neat. I liked the fact of it's like, okay, so this is how Brandon Sanderson is tying Aeon Door users into the Cosmere in general.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So
that was really cool. I think you said earlier the inclusion of the Ghost Bloods and their part of the story, generally overall very good. It was nice to see them in a positive light after so much of Stormlight being
I will
negative.
also say it was really nice to see Kelsier taking on a more lighthearted approach.
Yeah.
Because in Secret History, even, like, a lot of it is very, very serious. And what we've seen of Kelsier up until this point has been very serious, grumpy face things. Just because that was the memories that, like, Wax was encountering and things.
Sure.
But to see Kelsier pop up in person and still be Kelsier was kind of refreshing.
That's true. I think earlier you mentioned Hoyd's fortune thing where he just shows up. And he said this, I think, in Stormlight. He shows up where he's needed, right?
Right.
And he kept showing up to chauffeur Wax around.
Yes.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was.
That was really well done.
And I will say that, that is one of the things that I like about Word.
Is it a person, a place, or a thing?
Drawing a blank.
Is it a book?
let me take a step back and say that the fact that the fact that Hoyd was there to chauffeur Wax around so much, and clearly his destiny was leading him into that. If we support the idea that ferrochemical destiny is the way that is working,
right?
I do find it kind of hilarious. Also, to go back to something I was saying before that I never actually got to finish my thought on.
Oh, sure.
The fact that Hoyd is on Scadrial so much after Stormlight Era 1, and the fact that we do have access to the Aeons, makes me think that Hoyd did find a way to pull
design.
No. Well, yes, but what are those creatures called?
The Cryptic? The Spren?
Spren. Off-world.
It's possible.
Because I don't feel like he would leave design behind.
I do. I do think he would. I think it is a coin toss. Right now, it's a coin toss whether he has her or not.
I will say that we didn't get to see most of Hoyd being Hoyd usually, because Hoyd is typically there to be a storyteller.
Right.
And we do not see him in that capacity in Lost Metal.
No.
Actually, in Mistborn Era 2 at all, I don't think we really see him in that scenario.
No. He's
We do get an allusion to it in one of the newspaper clippings.
Which one was that?
In Bands of Mourning, there is a newspaper clipping that is an adventure of a woman chasing a person called the Haunted Man.
Right.
And the Haunted Man drops off of the gondola into empty air.
Right.
And she goes down to try and find his body. And she doesn't, but she sees a man called Hoyd who offers to tell her a story, and she declines.
That's
funny. Which makes me wonder whether or not she is integral to the functioning of all of the storylines going on.
Oh.
And Hoyd being there because of his destiny and things like that.
Yeah.
And offering to tell her a story being part of that. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. I don't know how specific those things get. But
I would say we didn't see Hoyd explicitly use anything light weaving specific.
Yeah.
That we couldn't attribute to costume makeup or his other form of light weaving that he has.
Right. The more subtle ones.
Yeah. Ultimately, design could be there or not. I don't think design is. Personally, I would bet that she's still trapped. And I think that will be a later Cosmere thing. I think that's a pretty specific...
Fair.
That's a pretty... It's so enwrapped in the Ghostblood story that if Hoyd had knowledge of that, then so would the Ghostbloods, I think.
Right. That's fair.
They're tracking. So
yeah. And I will see seeing Kelsier presented in a more positive light, but still having Marisi refuse join into the Ghostbloods was...
I thought she was going to join.
I thought she was too. I will say it kind of came as a surprise, though, in my opinion, a welcome one that she did not.
It was nice that there was subversion after a lot of very straightforward plot device. Plot. The Sander Lange didn't feel as revealing. It was a nice subversion, but I was looking forward to seeing her in the future, even or just having that knowledge that she's in the background somewhere doing something, and then maybe not seeing her. Her powers were really cool. Alas.
And it'll be interesting to see where things go. Because at this point, while we did get a very explicit, introduction of the Ghostbloods and some of what they can do and things like that, We obviously haven't seen everything.
No.
However, I will say that I like the fact that the Aeon Door can be accessed from other planets.
Yeah. That was nice to have a very straightforward explanation of that, or example of that.
Yes.
It seems so. I didn't think of this, but I saw someone mention it somewhere, or specifically, I also saw a meme, and it was Cosmere fans screaming in horror when somebody was showing them the Discord symbol, the app.
Oh.
The idea that Harmony could be changing into Discord.
Right.
I thought that was a really cool idea.
Yeah, and it's interesting on that front because, like, it also speaks to what if Trell was affecting Harmony with whatever... Assuming that Trell was infected with something, which is why the metal turned out rusted and pitted and things like that.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see that that's also what's happening to Harmony.
That would be.
Now, of course, I don't think that it was a mistake or very subtle for Sanderson to say, hey, when you split
Harmonium
and well, no, not Harmonium.
Oh.
When you split Harmonium into what is it? Lerasium and Adium.
Adium, yeah.
It was somewhat entertaining to me, I think, because it was a very much a real world equivalent for what might be going on with Scadrial as a whole.
Sure.
With it becoming Discord and splitting into two again, and so on and so forth. Like,
yeah. The third era is how do we kill a god?
Right. Which, I wouldn't necessarily be against that plot line.
Yeah.
Because that would actually harken back to the first one.
Yep.
Which, they thought the Lord Ruler was a god.
Yeah.
And, by all accounts, I can't blame them.
He was a sliver of infinity.
So, yeah, it would be definitely interesting to see that.
I agree.
Do you think that autonomy is going, or not autonomy, Harmony / or no, just Harmony. Do you think that that combination is going to get a new owner?
I would like to say no.
Fair.
Because the background idea for me was that, like, all the shards are going to get new vessels, and Hoyt is going to do some magic, and Edelnasium's going to come back.
See, I don't think that the shards are going to get new...
That was just my little pet theory.
Right. No, but I mean, like, I think it's important because at the... there's... Well... Anyway, never mind. It's not important.
Okay.
Actually. But yeah, no, I think that it'd be interesting to see Harmony change into Discord.
It would be.
And of course, that's the Ghostbloods are concerned about that, though clearly what's affecting Harmony right now is, at least thus far, temporary.
You're right.
The blocking of Harmony's sight, I mean. Not allowing them to see into the future.
Yeah, that was a cool, believable bit. That was clever.
And I will say, I actually liked that. I liked the fact that at least Autonomy can, if none of the other shards, can interfere with the future sight of another shard bearer.
That does seem like something like any shard could do. Like, take a little chunk of power, throw it at another. Limit them in some capacity.
Yes.
Although maybe strength of will might, or intent or something might change how effective that is. Yeah, there's so many places it could go. The places it'll go, the things it'll see.
What do you think Era 3 will be like based on the ending of Era 2?
So we know it's going to be like 1980s spy thriller. Right. I'd like to think that it'll be another heist setup. But
I think also the on that front, I think that the emotional alimantic arts will be much more effective.
Really?
Yes.
Even with aluminum lined hats being so prevalent?
Even with that, because I feel like people will have reasons to take them off. Like, oh, you walk into a building, you take off your hat. That's just what you do. Like, and I'm not saying that would necessarily develop on Scadrial, but I will say that I think that there's enough I'm completely lost my thought process there. What was I talking about?
Emotional almancy.
Right. Sorry. I think that there's enough of situations where your hat might be off and you could be at least minorly influenced by emotional almancy for it to warrant a place as even possibly the main character of Era 3. Because if it's going to be a spy thriller, then the more subtle arts are going to be, I think, taking prevalence.
Could be.
Because with Wax and Wayne, we did, I mean, like, despite what I said earlier, we did see a martial application of these abilities. You know, Wayne could freeze time or speed, you know what I mean?
Right.
Create a speed bubble. Wax had his gun and his steel pushing.
Right.
And I feel like Era 3 might be a focus on much more of the subtle allomantic or ferrochemical arts.
Could be.
That said, question, and this is a little thing. Do you think Era 3 protagonist is going to be a twinborn?
At the rate we're going, he or she will be a quadborn, or they will be a quadborn, and it'll be 4 different. Yep. That's the rate we're going.
What 4?
What 4 would they be?
Yes.
One from each of the. They'd have one physical, one emotional, one whatever the
major.
Other,
yeah.
One. No. I mean, I want to say that just by the process of how the genetics are working, that there's a real chance that at least one of the main characters will be more than just twinborn.
Fair.
Or spikes will be so prevalent. Spy thriller, like, I think in terms of like large scale warfare or Cold War.
Right.
Could be Cold War.
I think it's going to be Cold War.
Could be Cold War.
Yeah, no, if it's set during the 80s, I think it's going to be Cold War.
Could be Cold War with the North and South playing with whatever continent is on the other side of Scadrial.
Right.
Which US and Russia. Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
That I could see being interesting, because in my head I was like, well, crawling through vents and rappelling down lines to steal jewels. I was like, well, that's not really spy so much as it is thriller, maybe. So okay. Cold War would be one that is more. We get to see a lot of the culture of, let's say it's somebody from Ellendale or a team from Ellendale going to the south, infiltrating. We get to see a lot more of the culture. Something like that. could be at least an initial, but you could also say spy thriller like Mission Impossible.
Which, oh god, the new trailer for that newest one is just a straight up action movie. It's not even a spy thriller anymore.
So
I mean, I wouldn't mind something along the lines of the first Daniel Craig James Bond.
Quantum of Solace?
No, that was the second one. Casino Royale. I would definitely wouldn't mind something like that, where it's kind of equal parts action and intrigue.
Yeah.
I think that's
probably where it's going.
I think that movie in particular handled that balance really well. And I wouldn't mind seeing something like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, I think it had a very good, plausible reason as to why the villain is interacting with large amounts of money. You know, it was a very believable thing. The card game aspect of it was kind of cool, even though they didn't show it that much. Only when James Bond got involved, which is the right way to do it, by the way. If you're going to have that be a major plot point in your movie, don't have us watching them just play the game unless the protagonist is involved.
That's fair. We could see it revolve around the Bands of Mourning again. Because now the South has it. Honestly, that doesn't really excite me, but if he does it well, I think the Bands of Mourning it's interesting, but it's just, if it's an all-powerful object...
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. What else have we got?
Well, I mean, we did get The Way Wayne Died, which was effectively freezing time with his bubble and then pushing the barrels out.
Yeah.
And it was, I will freely admit, the explanation of a duralumin enhanced speed bubble was really cool.
Yeah. True.
So question for you.
Okay.
So we know now that Wax very much likely is a Mistborn.
Okay.
Because isn't that what Harmony said with the Lerasium, that Wax breathes some of it in or something like that, or dust or something along those lines?
I don't remember that.
I thought at the end, after Wayne died, when he's talking with Harmony, and Harmony is explaining that at the very last split that Wax did, he did manage to create some Lerasium.
Right.
And I thought there was something about the fact of, like, it being breathed in through the air, or maybe I'm remembering something else.
Maybe. I remember him talking about how his Kandra were able to scrape it off the walls. And then Cassier asked if there was any more, and Sazed lied.
And I thought... Because wasn't Wax portraying some unusual abilities? And didn't Harmony say something about...
Yeah, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He breathed it in.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah.
But he didn't... It was like coming down off of a high. It didn't give him the power. There wasn't enough to make him a full Mistborn.
Okay.
But he was able to experience some of the other... I'd have to reread it.
Right. I don't know. So anyway, regardless, my point still kind of stands, which is he potentially is a Mistborn.
Yeah.
Still definitely a Faring.
Uh-huh.
And now he has hemalurgic spikes, which, as of the end of the book, we have not seen him take out.
That's right.
So, it'll be interesting that we might have Wax, who is well, I guess we won't actually see him anymore because this was the last book. But it's interesting to see what the histories say about that.
It will be, and it'll be interesting to see if we go from a society that has no Mistborn to society that is full of people that could burn gold or could compound gold,
right?
Because of spikes. Yeah, really, there's a lot that Sanderson could do there, and I hope it's not too much too fast.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have to really say about it.
I think so. As I said, I mean, I'm going to reiterate that I'm glad Marcy got her own storyline.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did get an answer for the missing Allomancers.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't wholly satisfied with how that played out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what's coming next.
And I think, honestly, potentially, Sanderson is setting up the Et Metal Bomb for Era 3.
Yeah.
And the dangers they may face in that novel series.
Yeah. Because it's very, very realistic to have it be Cold War where you stockpile Et Metal bombs.
Well, and they have that nation down south, which I don't remember if that's even given a name.
I can't remember either.
But they have the flying ships and all that jazz.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So there could really be Cold War, or straight up war,
or straight up war.
And you still have the spy thriller bit.
It'll be interesting to read. It'll be interesting to see where he takes it because I know where I would potentially take the protagonist's abilities, which is I think I would give them steel pulling.
Okay.
Because the unique thing about steel pulling versus
iron pulling,
rather than steel pushing, is that you can walk up walls with iron pulling.
Sure.
So long as it's a metal structure or primarily metal, you can, and then just walk up. Which for a spy, I think would be very useful.
Right.
And then potentially one of the, I suppose at that point it would be one of the ferrochemical abilities. So I guess it wouldn't be emotional allomancy. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll wait and see. We'll see in 2024, 2025.
Yeah, because it's Secret Project and then it's Roshar, or it's Stormlight Archives 5.
Yep.
And then
Mistborn Era 3.
Yeah. Speaking of Mistborn Era 5, or not Mistborn, Stormlight Era 5, Stormlight Book 5. Good God.
You tired?
Yeah, apparently. Speaking of Stormlight Book 5, we do have the title.
That's true.
Prototype title, at least.
I mean, he said it's probably this.
Which is Knights of Wind and Truth.
Knights of Wind and Truth, yeah.
Which does bring the acronym, or the palindrome of the titles back around again.
That's right.
Because the A can be cut out with the and. Like most of the time for most... Now, that said, you'd also usually cut out the O in of.
Yeah.
So
he was also saying you could cut out the in Way of Kings.
True.
He mentioned a bunch of that. So from the initial reaction to this, I thought my first thought was, okay, Wind is Kaladin and Zeth. but specifically Windrunners, and then Truth is Truth Watchers.
Right. And I agree with you. I think that's going to be there because we specifically see in book 4, I think it's book 4.
Yeah.
I'm almost sure it's book 4. When Odium is presenting his version of the diagram, which goes out so much farther than Taravangian's.
Right.
But the part with Renarin is dark. Or not Renarin.
He's showing the diagram back to Taravangian.
Right. He's showing he's showing that like Taravangian had this diagram, and then he's showing his diagram, which goes so much further than Taravangian's does.
Gotcha. Yeah,
but Renarin, the little area with Renarin is like dark, where the rest of it is this golden projection that's dark. So
I'd like to. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I definitely think that you are correct insofar as the truth in that is the fact that the Truth Watchers and Renarin, possibly specifically, is going to be a major part of... okay, so...
There's, I think, from other people's ideas, the truth part is a triple entendre.
Okay.
Renarin.
Right.
Zeph is no longer truthless.
True.
Shallan speaks truth.
True.
However, it is a really well-written title.
So here's an interesting thing on that, though. Because when Odium is showing his diagram to Taravangian, and Taravangian's kind of in awe of how much further it goes than his diagram did and all that stuff, that was obviously before Taravangian meshed with Odium.
That's true.
So I'm kind of curious if that blind spot via Renarin is still applicable now that it is Teravodium and not old Odium.
I bet it is, and I think it's an inherent... It's not an inherent... It's a built-in plot device from Ja'anat, and we're either going to see Taravangian try to look at that spot and not be able to read it.
Right.
Or we are going to see a complete forget
that it's even there.
And that'll be intentional.
Far out theory, cultivation is going to be the ultimate enemy of the entire Cosmere.
Okay.
Well, if we look at it, cultivation set up Teravodium.
True.
Also potentially set up Dalinar to be the new host of Honor.
True.
Which I still think that's going to... That's why I think he can do the perpendicularity.
Yeah.
Or maybe the fact that he can do the perpendicularity is going to allow him to become the new
chicken
Honor. Yeah. Regardless, I feel that Dalinar is set up to be the new Honor. Which means that thus far, as far as we know, cultivation has set up the replacement of 2 shards. Odium specifically, Honor implicitly.
Right.
Which she has no reason to do thus far. Even taking in the idea of cultivation and what cultivation, what the shard of cultivation might impress you to do.
I mean, I would say change for growth, or growth by change, is cultivation, and that's her whole purpose.
Right, but we're not going to necessarily say that Taravangian becoming Teravodium is growth by change. It is change, don't get me wrong. But, why did she feel that Teravodium was more change than just letting Odium's plans play out? Or better change, more preferable change, not even better, more preferable change.
Could be.
So, now, even if cultivation is not the enemy of the Cosmere as a whole, I think the cultivation is definitely playing out her own game.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah. So I guess that's I jumped the gun a little bit, but that's other Sanderson news.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. A lot more stuff to know in the state of the Sanderson that is on YouTube or on his website. It's a nice little read. Not super important. So,
do you have a far out theory?
No. After that discussion, I'm a bit brain dead.
Fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that was Lost Metal. I think let me say this. Ultimately, while there were parts of it that I wasn't necessarily wholly a fan of, and parts of it that I did like a lot, I think it was a fitting end to the series.
Yeah.
At least this chunk of the series.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and it was well, the Era 2 was well done, given that it wasn't in his original plans.
Right, yes. I agree, it absolutely was. I think that it was... And it was a good look... It was a good look into the Twinborn thing. And I liked the Twinborn thing. And I know that this is kind of silly, but the way my brain works is like, if I was going to run a game, I would let the characters be Twinborn.
Right.
So long as compounding was not part of their thing. Because I feel like it offers a wide amount, or it doesn't offer a wide amount of abilities. It offers 2 abilities specifically. Right. But it offers an interesting mixing of abilities.
Yeah.
And it gives the players options on what powers they want to manifest.
That's true.
Now, the resonance thing is a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
And I would have difficulty with that, because we know one resonance.
Yeah.
Because the fact is that we don't actually see any resonance between Wayne's bend alloy burning and gold storing.
Right.
Which I found interesting.
That we know of.
Yeah, like we didn't see any, or if it was shown, it wasn't explicit enough.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's maybe even more interesting when combinations don't have resonances.
Well, but that's the thing. They don't never have a resonance.
They don't never have a resonance?
They don't never have they always, let me rephrase that. They always have a resonance.
Oh, okay.
A mixing of 2 powers always has a resonance.
Okay.
Which is why we saw it with the Knights Radiant as well.
Right.
The fact that the Windrunners have more squires than anybody else. The fact that Renarin was able to project his future visions the way that he did.
Sure.
And there's a few others that I am not recalling, to be perfectly honest. But I think possibly the fact that Shallan's illusions were able to have substance.
That's true. Yeah.
Like all the mixing of 2 powers always causes a resonance. Wax's speed bubble was that resonance. Or not speed bubble. Steel bubble was that resonance.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, you have to be like well versed with the power, which I'm not saying Wayne,
not really.
Wayne wouldn't be.
No, the Windrunners having more squires doesn't give a damn about what
that's
your
true.
Competency with the power.
But in Wax's case, was it not because he was more, I'm going to say, in tune with his steel pushing?
No, I don't think so. I think it was because the fact is that originally the reason I think that comes from is that originally Sanderson had it part of the fact that Wax was going to be a steel savant.
Right.
That's originally why he had the steel bubble in there.
Right. But
then he realized that didn't jive with the way that savants worked. And so he changed it. But I I think the only reason that Wax had as good a use of his powers as he did was that it was working off the draft where Wax was a savant with steel pushing.
Could be. We'll have to see what Sanderson shows us.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what Era 3 brings about. Do we think Wax still has the spikes in?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably dangerous to remove it.
Probably. That's interesting.
I guess they weren't that thick, so maybe not as dangerous.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it for The Lost Metal.
Yeah. Go read it.
Yes, go read it.
You cos nerds.
In a few days, we will start reading the first of the secret projects.
Yep.
And we will probably, the next few books at least, will be either reviews of the secret projects themselves, or we will include something about the loot box we had gotten that month.
That's right.
So.
Yeah.
Indeed. Until then, don't panic, world hoppers.
Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Just the actual saying.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Stop that.
The music you hear is Part 3, The Spirit, from Zavadilla's The Music of Elantris, produced by B-Roll Records. Available now on Apple Music, Spotify, and most music providers.
If you like what you hear, and you want others to hear it as well, please leave a rate and review. It really helps us get more listeners.